The silence inside the covered barn was heavier than the dry Texas air. Beams of sunlight broke through the cracks in the roof, striping the ground like faded memories. Sawyer Briggs sat on the edge of the wooden fence, elbows on his knees, eyes low. The dust on his jeans matched the grit on his face. Across from him stood Harlan Whitmore, a cattle baron in a tailored navy suit, shoes too polished for a place like this. His voice cut through the stillness like a blade. "You really think you know better than men who built empires from the ground up?" Harlan said, pointing his finger inches from Sawyer's face. "This ranch is sinking fast, and you're clinging to a damn horse like it's gonna save you." Behind him, 6 men watched in silence, worn boots, weathered faces, hats low. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others stayed stone-faced. They'd seen men broken before, but this was different. Sawyer slowly lifted his gaze. His tired blue eyes didn't blink. Next to him, Rust, his old chestnut horse with the white scar down his brow, shifted nervously. The lead rope hung loosely in Sawyer's calloused hand. "This horse has more honor than half the men who've walked through that gate," he said quietly, his voice calm but rooted deep, like an oak weathered by storms. Harlan's jaw clenched. He wasn't used to pushback, especially not from a dirt-covered rancher barely holding onto a dying piece of land. "You're dragging your family name through the mud," he shot back. "I came here to give you a dignified out. You're spitting in my face." Sawyer stood slowly. The dust swirled around his boots as he stepped forward. He didn't flinch under the eyes of the men surrounding them. "Sometimes losing everything's better than selling out to a man who's never had dirt under his fingernails," he said, his voice steady, almost quiet, but it landed like thunder. The silence returned, but this time it had changed. It wasn't heavy with judgment, it was thick with uncertainty, respect, even a hint of fear. Because in that moment, something unspoken passed between them all. This wasn't just a ranch dispute. This was the beginning of something much deeper. The next morning came slow and gray. Mist hung low over the open fields, blurring the fences that marked the edges of Sawyer's world. He stood alone on the porch of the old farmhouse, a coffee mug in hand and yesterday's words still burning in his chest. The boards beneath his boots creaked with each shift of weight, like the house itself was bracing for whatever came next. Inside, the silence was thick, broken only by the ticking of a worn-out clock his mother refused to replace. Sawyer's thoughts drifted back to his father, Boone Briggs, a man whose presence still haunted the land. Boone had been tough as iron and twice as stubborn. He'd built that ranch with nothing but blood, bone, and belief. But he'd also kept secrets. Too many. And now, years after the funeral and the foreclosure notices, Sawyer was beginning to suspect that some of those secrets were coming back to light. The kind that Harlan Whitmore might already know. Later that day, while working the south pasture, Sawyer found an old leather-bound ledger hidden beneath loose floorboards in the feed shed. It was his father's handwriting, blocky and rushed, but unmistakable. Inside were years of notes, names, and transactions. But one name kept repeating over and over again, in margins and scribbled footnotes, R.J. Malin. A name Sawyer had never heard, but something about it twisted his gut the moment he saw it. He didn't notice Emery Dell, the ranch hand who'd been with the Briggs family since Sawyer was a boy, standing behind him. Emery's lined face showed surprise when he spotted the ledger. "That's Boone's old book," he muttered, stepping forward. "Didn't know it was still around." His voice dipped, almost cautious. "You find anything strange in there?" Sawyer hesitated. "You ever hear of someone named R.J. Malin?" he asked, turning the book slightly so Emery could see. The older man's jaw tensed. He nodded slowly, then looked away toward the field, where Rust grazed peacefully. "Yeah," Emery said finally. "I heard that name. And if it's showing up in that book, it means you're about to learn things your old man never wanted you to." Back at the main house, Sawyer sat at the kitchen table long after the sun went down, The ledger spread in front of him like a map to a past he never lived. He could feel it. Something deeper than money or pride was buried under all of this. And as the wind picked up outside and the porch light flickered, one thing became clear. Harlan Whitmore wasn't just after land. He was after a truth. A truth Sawyer wasn't sure he was ready to face. 2 days later, Sawyer found himself behind the wheel of his old pickup, driving down a forgotten gravel road toward a town barely marked on the map, Greystone Hollow. He had followed one of the addresses listed next to R.J. Mallin's name in the ledger. His father's handwriting had grown more frantic on those pages, as if Boone had been chasing something, or someone, he couldn't quite catch. The further Sawyer read, the more uneasy he became. There were no dollar amounts next to that name. Only phrases like, "do not trust," and "debt never settled." Greystone Hollow was the kind of town that time had stopped caring about. A single gas station, a boarded-up diner, and a post office that doubled as the town hall. Sawyer stepped out of the truck and adjusted his hat, his boots hitting the pavement with a dull thud. An old man sitting outside the gas station watched him closely. "You a Briggs?" the man asked before Sawyer even opened his mouth. His voice was raspy, but sharp. "You've got your daddy's jaw, and his trouble." Inside the post office, Sawyer managed to track down a dusty file box behind the counter after convincing the clerk he was looking into an old family debt. He found a single envelope marked Malin, R.J., Confidential. Inside was a faded photo of a man in uniform, not military, but some kind of private security, standing beside a younger Boone Briggs. Both looked tense, unsmiling. On the back of the photo, scribbled in pen, "He never forgave what happened at Birch Ridge." Back at the ranch, Emery Dell was already waiting when Sawyer returned. He didn't ask where the boy had been. He just looked at the envelope in Sawyer's hand and shook his head. "I warned you," Emery muttered, then added quietly, "Birch Ridge, that's where it all went wrong. Whatever happened between your father and Malin, it tore through more than just business. It nearly cost lives." Sawyer sat down hard on the front steps. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from the feeling of standing at the edge of something he couldn't walk away from now. That night, Harlan Whitmore returned, but not to argue. He showed up with a lawyer in tow and a tone that was colder than before. "We need to talk, Sawyer," he said, stepping out of a black SUV. "There's something you don't know about your father's deal with Malin. And if you don't listen now, you're going to lose a hell of a lot more than land." Sawyer stared at him in silence. The wind rustled the dry grass around them like a warning. He didn't know what Harlan was really after, but something told him the man standing before him knew exactly what had happened at Birch Ridge, and just how dangerous the truth could be. Sawyer didn't invite Harlan inside. He kept his stance firm on the porch, arms crossed, jaw tight. The lawyer stayed back, arms folded, eyes scanning the property like a vulture. Harlan, calm as ever, stepped forward just enough to show he had nothing to hide, or at least, he wanted it to seem that way. "Your father made a decision 27 years ago that set a lot of things in motion," Harlan began. "Decisions that involved men like R.J. Malin. Men who don't forget. And don't forgive." Sawyer said nothing, but his silence was like a dam holding back a flood. Harlan continued. "Birch Ridge wasn't just a deal gone bad. It was a cover-up. Something went wrong there, something violent. Your father was supposed to be the scapegoat. But somehow, he walked away. Malin didn't. And ever since then, he's been hunting for payback." He paused. "Malin isn't dead, Sawyer. He disappeared." That revelation hit harder than Sawyer expected. All this time, he thought he was chasing a ghost. But the man was alive, somewhere, and clearly still tangled in his family's past. "So why do you care?" Sawyer asked, narrowing his eyes. "What does any of this have to do with you?" Harlan's expression darkened. "Because your father owed Malin something, and when Boone died, the debt didn't. He took a breath, carefully choosing his next words. Malin reached out to me a few months ago. He wanted me to buy this ranch, not for profit, not for cattle, but for leverage. I don't know exactly what he's planning, but if he gets hold of this land, you'll be just another pawn in a game your father started and left unfinished. Sawyer felt his stomach twist. He looked out toward the barn, where Rust still roamed calmly under the moonlight, unaware of the weight crashing down on his owner's shoulders. "So, what now?" he asked quietly. "You expect me to sell, just to stop a man I've never met from coming after me?" Harlan stepped closer, voice low. "I expect you to decide how much your pride is worth. Because if Malin's really coming, land is the least of what he wants." And with that, he turned and walked back to the SUV, his lawyer following. Sawyer stood alone again, the wind colder than before. Birch Ridge wasn't just a place, it was a wound. And someone had just ripped the stitches wide open. The next morning, Sawyer woke before dawn, his sleep restless and haunted by flashes of a man's face he'd never seen. He sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, the old floorboards creaking under his weight like they recognized the storm coming. Something inside him had shifted. The air felt different, heavy, like the land was holding its breath. Birch Ridge wasn't just history anymore. It was coming for him. Down in the barn, Emery Dell was brushing Rust when Sawyer walked in, boots dragging through the dust. Emery looked up and didn't need to ask. He saw the weight in the boy's eyes. "You found out more," he said quietly. Sawyer nodded, handing him the ledger, now marked with new notes and a printed copy of the photo from Greystone Hollow. "He's alive," Sawyer muttered. "Malin's alive. And Harlan's been dealing with him behind my back." Emery's hands froze on the brush. "Then you need to listen to me now," he said firmly. "What happened at Birch Ridge, it wasn't just a bad business deal. Boone and Malin, they were part of something bigger. Something that went way beyond cattle and contracts." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "There was a man killed that night. No police. No press. Just silence. Boone buried it. And now, Malin wants you to pay for your father's sins." Sawyer felt the blood drain from his face. He remembered being 8 years old, waking up in the middle of the night to see his father's truck come back covered in mud and silence. His mother had cried quietly in the kitchen that night, wiping her hands on a dish rag that was already soaked. He never asked questions back then. But now he couldn't unsee the truth buried in those memories. That afternoon, a letter arrived. No stamp. No return address. Just his name, handwritten in a jagged scrawl across the envelope. Inside was a single photo. It showed Sawyer, from behind, standing at his father's grave. The message on the back was short, "You look just like him. RJ." His hands trembled as he held the picture. It hadn't been taken long ago. Malin was watching him. Not from afar. From here. From somewhere close. And whatever was coming next wouldn't wait for Sawyer to be ready. By nightfall, Sawyer had armed the house. Not with weapons, but with light. Every room lit. Every door locked. The old Briggs farmhouse hadn't seen this kind of tension since Boone's final weeks, when he paced the floors like a man being hunted by something only he could see. Now, that same haunted energy ran through Sawyer's blood. Malin wasn't just close, he was circling. And the photo proved it. Someone had been near the grave, watching him. Rust paced inside the barn like he sensed the change. Emery had gone home hours ago, but not before warning Sawyer to sleep light and keep his ears sharp. "If Malin's back in this county, he's not coming for a handshake," Emery said before driving off. And Sawyer knew it. The past didn't knock. It kicked in the door. Unable to sleep, Sawyer returned to the feed shed, the same one where he found the ledger. He sifted through the old drawers, boxes, crates. That's when he found it, a cassette tape, labeled only with a date, August 12, 1998, and the word Birch. Heart pounding, he grabbed the old tape player from the corner and popped it in. Static crackled, then a voice, Boone's. I don't trust him anymore. Not after what I saw. Mallin's got a streak in him. Mean. Quiet. The kind of quiet that waits for you to turn your back, Boone said, his voice low and tired. If anything happens to me, don't let him near Sawyer. He's not after me. Not really. He wants to ruin everything I built, through my boy. Sawyer paused the tape, his hand shaking. His father knew. All those years ago, Boone had sensed Mallin's obsession, his bitterness. It wasn't just business. It was personal. Deeply personal. Whatever happened at Birch Ridge hadn't ended that night. It had just gone underground. Now, it was clawing its way back to the surface, through Sawyer's life. Suddenly, the porch light outside flickered. Once. Then again. Sawyer froze. He moved slowly to the window and looked out into the dark fields that stretched past the barn. Nothing moved. No car. No animal. Just the kind of stillness that only comes before something breaks. And in the distance, barely audible, a truck engine rumbled once, then fell silent. Someone was out there. Sawyer didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table with the cassette player in front of him, Boone's voice still lingering in the air like cigarette smoke. Every creak in the floorboards made his fingers twitch. Every gust of wind against the window set his nerves on edge. Rust was tied up closer to the house now, the old horse restless, ears pinned back, as if he too could feel something was wrong, something coming. By dawn, Sawyer had checked the entire property twice. Nothing. No tire tracks. No boot prints. Just the ghost of an engine in the dark. But he knew. Malin was nearby. And this wasn't just about intimidation anymore. It was psychological warfare. Piece by piece, he was breaking Sawyer down, rattling his foundation until all that remained was fear and uncertainty. And it was working. In town, Sawyer met Emery at the diner just after it opened. The old man looked like he hadn't slept either. "There's talk," Emery said, stirring his coffee slow. "Sheriff down in Birch Ridge says someone's been asking around about the Briggs family. Didn't say who, but the way he described him. Tall, quiet, wore gloves even in the heat." Emery met Sawyer's eyes. "It's Malin. He's looking for something, or someone." Sawyer clenched his jaw. Then why not just show up? If he wants a fight, why not face me? Emery leaned back in the booth, sighing. "Because this ain't about fighting, Sawyer. It's about making you unravel. He's not after revenge in the way you're thinking. Malin, he wants legacy. He wants to erase Boone's name. And yours." As Sawyer drove back to the ranch, his thoughts spun like wheels stuck in mud. What did Malin want that was buried here? Land? Secrets? Or was it the satisfaction of watching Boone's only son destroy himself trying to protect a past he barely understood? That thought stuck with him as he turned onto the gravel road leading home and saw something new. The front gate was open. He never left the gate open. Sawyer slammed the truck into park and jumped out before the engine stopped rumbling. The front gate hung wide like a broken jaw. The chain that normally held it shut was cut clean, not snapped, not rusted. Cut. Precise. Cold. His boots crunched the gravel as he walked the fence line, scanning the ground for prints, tire marks, anything. The only thing louder than his heartbeat was the silence. Not even birdsong. Just that heavy, suffocating quiet. Inside the barn, Rust stood frozen. Ears forward, nostrils flaring. He wasn't tied where Sawyer had left him. The rope was loose, coiled on the floor like a snake. But more than that, there was a smell in the air, not manure or hay. Gasoline. Faint, but fresh. Sawyer's stomach turned. Someone had been in there. Had walked right into his world, touched what was his. That wasn't just trespassing. That was a message. Back inside the house, nothing looked stolen. No broken windows. No forced doors. But when Sawyer entered his father's study, a room he barely used, he stopped cold. The cassette tape was missing. The tape with Boone's voice. In its place sat a single Polaroid, still developing on the desk. It was a photo of Sawyer himself, asleep in his bed from the night before. Sawyer staggered back, a cold sweat running down his spine. The message was clear. Malin had been inside the house while Sawyer slept. And he hadn't taken money, tools, or keys. He'd taken a piece of the past. A piece of truth. Something Boone left behind that Malin wanted to erase or control. It was never about property lines. It was about control. Power through fear. He ran to the barn, threw open the tack trunk, and dug through the bottom until his fingers wrapped around cold metal. An old revolver. Boone's. Still loaded. Still reliable. Sawyer had always sworn he'd never be like his father, never live looking over his shoulder. But this wasn't just his fight anymore. Malin wasn't haunting Boone's shadow. He was coming for the sun. And the only way to stop it was to face him. That night, Sawyer didn't light the house. He sat alone in the dark, waiting. This time, if Malin came, he wouldn't be watching from the shadows. He'd have to step into the light. The fog rolled in thick just after midnight. It crept across the fields like a tide, swallowing the fences, the barn, and eventually the front steps of the house. Sawyer sat inside, back straight, revolver on the table, every light off. His ears strained for any sound out of place, a creak, a footstep, the hush of breath where there should be none. Outside, Rust let out a single low whinny. Then silence again, the kind that presses on your chest. Then a knock. Not loud. Just enough to say, "I'm here." Sawyer stood slowly, picked up the gun, and moved to the front door. When he opened it, he didn't see a man. Not at first. Just the shape of one, tall, still, wearing a long coat, gloved hands by his side. Then the voice came, low and cold as iron. "You've got your father's eyes. Shame he never used them to see the truth. Malin." Sawyer stepped out onto the porch, heart hammering, gun at his side. "You've been hiding in shadows for years," he said. "You gonna say what you came to say, or just leave more photos on my pillow?" Malin didn't move. "You think this is about photos?" he replied. "Your father stole something from me. Something I bled for. Something I killed for. And now you're sitting on top of it, thinking your name protects you." Sawyer's voice didn't shake. "Then take it. Take the land. Take the house. Hell, take whatever legacy you think he left. But you leave me and mine out of this." Malin finally stepped forward, out of the fog, and for the first time, Sawyer saw him clearly. His face was lined, hard, eyes like shattered glass. Not rage. Not madness. Just a cold, methodical need to finish something that had never ended. But instead of raising a weapon, Malin reached into his coat and pulled out the cassette tape. Boone's voice. The final recording. "You want the truth?" he said, holding it up. "Then listen to what your father really left behind. And after that, you decide if I'm the villain or if he was." Sawyer lowered the gun just an inch. The tape landed on the porch with a soft thud between them. And with that, Malin turned, walking back into the fog without another word. No fight. No gunfire. Just silence. But inside that silence was the truth Sawyer feared the most. The tape clicked into the old cassette player with a dull snap. Sawyer sat alone on the porch, the revolver now resting untouched beside his boot. The fog had lifted, but a new kind of heaviness sat in the air, one made of memory, of things finally ready to be said. He pressed play. Static buzzed, then his father's voice broke through, older than before, slower. "Warn. I know this day's coming," Boone said. "I never told you, Sawyer. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I didn't want you to carry what I couldn't bury. Birch Ridge wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. Malin and I were part of something we shouldn't have touched, a private land dispute that turned bloody. He made a call, and a man died. And I helped cover it." Sawyer closed his eyes as the voice continued. "Malin thinks I betrayed him. Truth is, I saved him. Took the blame, paid the cost. Lost friends. Your mother never forgave me. But I kept you safe. That's all I ever wanted." A pause. Then one final line. "If Malin ever comes for you, don't meet him with hate. Meet him with understanding. That's the only way to end this right." When the tape ended, Sawyer didn't cry. He didn't rage. He just sat in the silence his father had left him, and felt, maybe for the first time, like a man who finally knew the whole story. Malin hadn't come for revenge. He'd come for closure. And Boone, in his broken way, had left the tools for it. Not a fight. Not fear. Truth. 2 days later, Sawyer drove to the edge of Birch Ridge. Alone. He stood near the spot marked in the ledger, where a small rusted plaque hid under brush. James Clary, 1973 to 1998. The forgotten name of the man who died. Malin was already there, sitting on a fallen tree, quiet as before. He didn't speak. Neither did Sawyer. Instead, Sawyer placed the tape on the plaque, stepped back, and nodded. That was all. Malin stood, gave a slight nod in return, and walked away without another word. No vengeance. No war. Just an ending that had waited decades to come. Back at the ranch, Sawyer fed Rust at sundown. The wind was softer now. The silence, no longer threatening. And as the last rays of sun touched the porch, he finally understood. Some legacies aren't about the land you protect, but the truth you choose to pass on.